There's a strange contradiction that almost nobody talks about. Some people can do everything that looks like love and still feel almost physically unable to say the words. They show up, they fix things, they remember the details, they worry in the quiet. But when the moment arrives, when a simple sentence could seal the feeling, their throat tightens, their mind goes blank, and suddenly they're bargaining with time. Later. Not now. It's not the right moment. It'll sound weird. What most people miss is that the struggle isn't usually about a lack of love. It's about what love costs in that person's inner world. Imagine a familiar scene. Two people are walking home at night, street lights flicker, the air is cold enough to make your hands curl into your sleeves. One of them has been holding something back all evening, like a note folded in their pocket. They stop, their voice softens. They say, "I love you." It lands gently, like a warm hand on the back of the neck, and then silence. The other person smiles, maybe even squeezes their hand. But the words don't come. Their face becomes carefully neutral, as if emotion is something they can tidy away. And in their head, there's a rush of thoughts that have nothing to do with romance and everything to do with survival. If I say it, I can't take it back. If I say it, they'll see me. If I say it, I'm making a promise I can't guarantee. If I say it, I'm giving them a weapon. That sounds dramatic, but the nervous system doesn't do poetry, it does threat detection. For some people, "I love you" isn't a sweet phrase. It's a door that locks behind them, and their whole life has been about keeping doors unlocked. When you grow up in a home where love was steady, words like that are just words. They're a mirror. You say it, you hear it back, and the world stays safe. But if you grew up where love was conditional, where affection was offered and withdrawn like a reward, then those words become loaded, they become currency, and you learn early that currency can be stolen. The problem isn't the phrase itself, it's the history attached to it. Sometimes the history is loud. A parent who only said "I love you" after they exploded, like the apology came packaged with the damage. Or a caregiver who said it and then disappeared, physically or emotionally, leaving the child to hold the word, like a receipt for something they never received. But sometimes the history is quiet. A house where nobody said it, because nobody did feelings out loud. Love was assumed but never spoken. In that kind of environment, you don't learn emotional language, you learn logistics. You learn to contribute, you learn to be good. And later, when someone asks you to translate warmth into words, it feels like trying to speak a language you understand but never practiced. The mouth doesn't know where to place the syllables. And there's another layer. Saying "I love you" is not just expressing emotion, it's admitting dependence. Even if you're independent, even if you have your own life, those words imply "you matter to my nervous system." That's frightening if your nervous system learned that needing someone is the first step to being disappointed. You can be incredibly loyal and still be terrified of emotional visibility, because visibility is risk. The moment you say it, you become legible, and once someone can read you, they can hurt you. That's the old logic. It isn't always rational, it's just consistent. This is where attachment comes in, not as a trendy label, but as a lived pattern. If you had to become self-contained early, you might have built an identity around not needing much. You're the person who handles it, who doesn't make a fuss, who doesn't fall apart. And that identity can feel like a suit of armor that kept you alive. So when a partner, a friend, even a parent later in life reaches for emotional closeness, part of you wants it and part of you flinches. Not because you're cold, because closeness threatens the structure you built to stay safe. Some people say "I love you" easily because it feels like releasing a bird from their chest. Other people can't say it because it feels like putting their heart on the table and walking away from it. There's also shame in the background, and shame is subtle. Shame doesn't always say "you're bad." Sometimes it says "you're too much," or "you're embarrassing," or if you express something sincere, people will laugh. If you were mocked for being tender, if your softness was treated as foolish, you learn to keep that part hidden. You might even be the funny one now, the competent one, the one who can talk about anything except the one thing that matters. And when you try to say "I love you," you can feel the old heat rise in your face. The fear of being exposed as needy or naive. There's a reason sarcasm and seriousness rarely live comfortably together in the same mouth. Saying "I love you" is serious, it's unarmored. And for people trained in armor, unarmored speech feels like standing outside in the rain without clothes. Then there are people who associate those words with obligation. In some families, "I love you" was never a gift, it was a hook. It meant "so you owe me," it meant "so don't leave," it meant so behave. And when love becomes a tool for control, the adult child grows up allergic to the phrase, not because they don't feel love, but because they don't want to use it as leverage and they don't want it used on them. They want love to be clean, but they're not sure it ever is. So they stay silent to keep it pure, ironically missing the fact that silence can contaminate things too. Culture matters here, more than people admit. Some cultures are emotionally expressive in public, where affection is a language everyone speaks on the street. Other cultures treat emotional disclosure as private, even suspicious, then add gender expectations. Many men were taught that verbal tenderness is not masculine, that love should be proven through action, and that speaking the words makes you vulnerable in a way you're not allowed to be. Many women were taught that saying it first makes you too available, that withholding can create value, that emotional honesty is dangerous in the dating marketplace. Everyone is absorbing incentives, even when they swear they're not. Modern life also trains a certain kind of emotional caution. Dating app culture, social media, the endless awareness of options, it can turn sincerity into a liability. People start managing their feelings like investments. Don't overcommit. Don't show your cards. Don't be the one who cares more. And I love you is the ultimate card to show. So even people with decent childhoods can struggle now, not because they're damaged, but because the environment rewards detachment. But the most interesting part is how the struggle can hide behind competence. Some people will say, I don't say it because I show it. And sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's a clever defense that keeps them from facing something, that words create a shared reality. When you say I love you, you make the relationship real in a new way. You define it. You take away ambiguity. And ambiguity is comfortable for someone who is afraid of expectation, because expectation implies responsibility. Once you say it, there's a standard. There are needs that might follow. There's the possibility of failing someone. If you grew up being loved only when you performed well, then love feels like a test you can fail, so you avoid naming it. If you don't say it, you can't fail at it. You can stay in the grey zone, where everything is implied and nothing is demanded. Notice what happens in the body when someone can't say it. Often it isn't just psychological, it's somatic. The chest tightens, the jaw locks, the breath becomes shallow. That's not caring, that's the nervous system perceiving a threat. The threat might be rejection, or engulfment, or humiliation, or grief, because love isn't only joy. Love is also the awareness that you can lose someone. Saying I love you can bring mortality into the room. It can summon the shadow of endings. If you've experienced loss, especially sudden loss, you might avoid those words because they make the attachment conscious, they make it sharp, they make the potential pain feel closer. Some people live as if not naming love will protect them from grief. It won't, but the mind does what it can. There's also a quieter fear. What if I say it and I don't feel it the same tomorrow? Some people confuse love with a permanent emotional high. They think if they say I love you, they're claiming a constant feeling. And since feelings change, they don't trust themselves. But love isn't a mood, it's a pattern. It's what you return to. It's what you choose when the chemicals are ordinary. The trouble is, if you were raised around inconsistent affection, you may have learned to trust only intensity. Calm love feels suspicious. So you wait for intensity to justify the words, and then it passes and you miss the moment again. And then there are the people who don't say it because deep down, they don't believe they deserve to. This one is painful, because it can look like pride from the outside. But inside, it's a belief that closeness is temporary, that people will eventually see something wrong with you. If you say I love you, you're not just giving love, you're admitting you want to be loved back. That's the vulnerable part, wanting, asking without asking. And if you've been disappointed enough, wanting starts to feel like a mistake. So you train yourself to be the person who doesn't need verbal reassurance. You tell yourself it's childish. You tell yourself it's not necessary. But in the quiet, you still listen for it, you just won't request it. What's tragic is how often two people misinterpret each other here. One person needs words to feel safe, the other person experiences words as danger. So one keeps asking, gently or not, why don't you say it? And the other hears, you're failing, you're not enough. The pressure makes the throat close even more. Then the first person feels unloved, and the second person feels controlled. Both are actually trying to feel secure, they're just using opposite strategies. If you're the one who struggles to say it, it might help to realize this isn't a character flaw, it's a learned adaptation. At some point, silence kept you safe. At some point, emotional restraint helped you navigate a home, a school, a relationship, a social world where vulnerability had consequences. The problem is that adaptations don't retire on their own. They keep working long after the environment changed. You can be with someone kind and still react like you're with someone unpredictable, because the body remembers patterns more than it remembers logic. So how do you change something that feels so automatic? Not by forcing yourself to perform romance like a script, and not by shaming yourself for being bad at feelings. The first step is simpler and harder. You tell the truth about the fear underneath, not the polished fear, the real one. The one that sounds like, if I say it and you leave, I'll feel stupid. Or, if I say it, you'll own me. Or, if I say it, you'll expect more than I can give. When you name the fear, you reduce its power. Because fear loves vagueness. It thrives in the fog. It hates being examined in daylight. The next step is learning that love can be communicated in multiple dialects, but dialects still need translation. If your instinct is to show love through action, keep doing that. But also understand that the person you care about might need words the way you need space. Needs are not insults, they're just needs. You don't have to become someone else. You just have to become more bilingual. You can start smaller. I care about you. I'm glad you're here. You matter to me. These aren't lesser truths, they're bridges. And with repetition, the nervous system learns that the bridge doesn't collapse. And if you're on the other side, if you love someone who struggles to say it, there's a delicate balance. You shouldn't have to starve for affection. But pressure rarely produces sincerity. It produces performance. Sometimes the most helpful question isn't why can't you say it, but what happens inside you when you try. That question treats the silence as information, not as rejection. It invites honesty rather than defense. The goal isn't to win the words. The goal is to create enough safety that the words can arrive without being dragged. Because when I love you is forced, it loses the very thing it's supposed to contain. Ultimately, the sentence I love you is small, but the act is huge. It's a declaration of attachment in a world that teaches people to stay unattached. It's a willingness to be affected, to be changed, to be hurt, potentially, and to do it anyway. Some people say it like breathing because their history taught them breathing is safe. Other people hold their breath because their history taught them air can be taken away. If you're someone who struggles with these words, there's a possibility here that might feel both relieving and sad. Your difficulty is evidence of how seriously you take love. You're not casual with it, you don't throw it around, you sense that it binds, that it changes the contract between two people, and you're right, it does, but love is not only a contract, it's also a practice, a daily, imperfect human practice. Saying it doesn't guarantee anything, not forever, not safety, not immunity from loss. It only guarantees one thing, that for a moment, you let someone know what is true inside you, and that moment matters more than we like to admit. Because people can survive many things, but uncertainty about being loved has a particular way of eroding the spirit, slowly, like water against stone. So maybe the question isn't whether you can say, I love you. Maybe the question is what you believe will happen if you do. Will you be trapped? Will you be laughed at? Will you be rejected? Will you be required to become someone you can't be? If those are the ghosts in the room, of course your voice hesitates. But ghosts are echoes, not prophecies. They're old sound waves bouncing around new walls. The work, over time, is teaching your body and your mind that the present is not the past. That tenderness isn't a trap. That being seen doesn't always end in punishment. And that love, spoken aloud, can be less like handing over a weapon and more like turning on a light. Quietly, carefully, not to prove anything, just to let another human being know they're not alone in what they feel. And if you can't say it yet, maybe you start by listening to what the silence has been protecting you from and thanking it for its service. Then, when you're ready, you let the words out, not as a performance, but as a simple act of contact, a small sentence that carries a whole history, and, if you're lucky, a whole future.